Okay, my talk today is on the entire 1875 graduating class at Purdue University. It is a relatively simple task since we're talking about one person, John Bradford Harper, chemistry major. The chemistry department, of course, is very proud of the fact that the first Purdue graduate was a chemistry major. The degree options were a bit limited that year, of course. And Harper never pursued a career in chemistry. The Indiana Agricultural College existed only on paper, beginning in 1865, and remained so until 1872 when construction began on the Chauncey, Indiana campus. Chauncey is today, of course, known as West Lafayette. The first buildings were the farm residence and the barn south of State Street along what is now Russell Street. At least I think it's still called that, unless it's been named after a president or something. By the fall of 1874, 4 more buildings were either completed or under construction. By that time, due to the money and land offered by John Purdue, a local businessman, the school is now called Purdue University. So let's see here. What's wrong with that picture, by the way? Anybody? This is the campus that John Bradford Harper would have recognized. Well, the buildings were being built, the staff and faculty were being assembled. Purdue's first president, Professor Richard Owen of Indiana University, and a member of the famous Indiana family. However, Owen clearly demonstrated a lack of understanding of the nature and the task of this new institution and resigned in March of 1874. From the fall of 1872 to 1874, 6 faculty were hired. 5 were men, 1 was a woman, and Abraham Shortridge was selected as president. One of the last faculty members to be hired was Harvey Wiley, a professor of chemistry. There's the missing building. At the time of his hiring, he was on the faculty of Northwestern Christian University of Indianapolis, now known as Butler University. The major player in this tale, John Bradford Harper, was a student at Northwestern. It appears that the Harper family had moved to Indianapolis and lived near the Irvington campus. Wiley was a bachelor and roomed with the Harpers at 61 College Avenue. The location of their house is now a battered asphalt parking lot near an abandoned building. When Wiley traveled to Chauncey to take on his new position, he brought with him the son of Elizabeth and James. Their son, John Bradford Harper, was a junior majoring in chemistry at Northwestern. According to Wiley, Harper took a special course in higher mathematics and to pursue a career in engineering, as well as completing his degree in chemistry. During his time at Purdue, he helped found Purdue's first fraternity, Sigma Chi, the first literary society, its first organized sports team called the Purdue Nine, and its first student newspaper, The Purdue, which he co-edited with Wiley. There's the volume 1, number 1, right there. On a side note, there is an account of a baseball game in which where Harper was the behind, which we call today the catcher, and President Shortridge was the judge, what we call the umpire. And you can notice the guy in the black there. This is judges didn't, or the umpires at the time did not stand directly behind the catcher. But an errant pitch struck President Shortridge in the face, and he was smoking a cigar at the time, and he swallowed the cigar whole. Purdue University opened its doors to prospective students on September 16th, 1874. And the first annual register of the university, there are 51 students named. 13 were seeking their bachelor's degree. 36 were in the preparatory department. 2 were listed as special students. All were male. 8 prospective female enrollees were denied admission due to their sex. At the very top of the list was the first student, a 4-year student by the name of John Bradford Harper of Indianapolis. And he again was the sole member of that class. Little is known about Harper's early life. He was born in Fort Madison, Iowa, sometime in August of 1855 or 1856, depending on the source. His mother, Elizabeth B. Harper, was originally from Ohio, and his father was Colonel James P. Harper, originally from Pennsylvania. James served in the Union Army during the Civil War in the 7th Iowa Volunteer Infantry Regiment, and eventually rose to the rank of colonel. In 1870, the U.S. Census has the family living in Rockville, Indiana, and James was a civil engineer. On June 17th, 1875, in the Military Hall and Gymnasium, Harper received his diploma. It was a rainy day, which resulted in a smaller crowd than was anticipated. However, those who had played a significant role in the founding and development of the institution were there. John Purdue, President Shortridge, Indiana Governor Hendricks, each addressed the assembled university and community members. An unscripted part of the ceremony was an unrehearsed speech by John Purdue. He reported to have floundered through a lengthy discussion of the infant institution, his hopes for its growth, the necessity for such institutions for the education of our youth, the importance of the printing press and educational institutions that cause the scales to fall from the eyes and clear away evil and place man on a higher plane. He talked about the hurried development of the institution, the blunders made, and rules that needed to be established for the conduct of faculty and trustees, which he stated were imperfect. He seemed to be encouraged by those who caused the blunders would be leaving, and admitted at the end of the speech that he and the trustees don't get on very nicely. Yeah. These, of course, were not the most appropriate statements that could be made at such an occasion, but Purdue is never known for a sense of tact. One account of Harper's graduation address, on the other hand, was upbeat and demonstrated his youthful faith in science and human progress. After some more music, and it goes on, after some more music, the graduate, John B. Harper, came forward and delivered his orations, which was entitled "The Search for Truth." Sounds like something a 20-year-old would do, in which the progress of human investigation and growth of human thought was enlarged upon. The speaker very plainly indicated that faith in the boundless capacity of man, and gave religion a fair warning that it had better not undertake to interfere with science, or it will get hurt. In the manner of its preparation and presentation, the address was quite commendable, the writer says, and was warmly received. Harper, it seems, was fully committed to the prevalent American belief that science and engineering, true grit and perseverance would conquer nature, and the belief systems that held progress back would be overcome. Popular ideas of the day, of course, was rain would follow the plow, and the natural resources were endless. And if you notice in this picture, this is all very typical of that period. You've got the railroads coming in, in the back, Here are all the settlers and everything. There's probably a Pony Express rider right there. And nature, the buffalo and Native American are out front running away from it all. And quote unquote, getting out of the way. In July 1875 issue of the Purdue, a precursor of the Purdue Exponent, the university proudly boasted about Harper. Our first graduate, it says. Purdue sends forth her first graduate this year in the person of John B. Harper of Indianapolis. Mr. H is nearly 20 years old, of medium height and light complexion. He is muscular and very active. Mr. Harper graduated from the chemical school, having taken 3 previous years of this course in the NWCU at Indianapolis. His weight is 135 pounds and is of Presbyterian antecedents, but is not a member of any church. Mr. Harper intends to pursue his studies further the coming summer at the Harvard School of Geology at Cumberland Gap, and then probably will go to Columbia School of Mines. He expects to make some department of chemistry as a specialty, probably metallurgy. As stated, Harper did not finish his education after graduation, although he did not go to Columbia University. There's absolutely no evidence for that. Soon after his graduation, he headed for Cumberland Gap, Tennessee. His goal was to go to the Geological Field School, headed by Nathaniel Southgate Shaler of Harvard University. He was accompanied on this trip south by David Starr Jordan of Indianapolis, who was one of the field school instructors. Jordan later became the president of Indiana University and the founding president of Stanford University. After arriving in Livingston, Kentucky, they walked 90 miles through the Kentucky countryside, and along the way, they played baseball with local teams as they encountered en route. Jordan was the pitcher and Harper was the behind. Harper's field school days were filled with lots of activity, apparently. Each day started and ended with an hour-long lecture. Field trips and specimen collections were included in their activity, including the catching and pickling of rattlesnakes. Occupying the rest of the day. Reports were made each evening about the day's findings. And the students assisted also in mapping and surveying the region. Although Harper received a degree in chemistry, he apparently never really used it. In 1880, the US Census, he's listed as living in Rockville, Indiana, and following his father's footsteps as a civil engineer. He may have been one of the first Purdue graduates to pursue a career in railroad. This is certainly fitting for somebody who would later be referred to as a Boilermaker. He worked for 2 railroads in those days. One was the Cloverleaf, otherwise known as the Toledo, Cincinnati, and Illinois Railroad, which formed in 1981. Initially, the line stretched from Toledo to St. Louis and later expanded westward. For the Cloverleaf, he served as the chief engineer of the western division of that railroad. In late 1880s, Harper moved to Colorado. Harper's first after graduation appearance in Purdue publications in the 1890 Debris and 1890 Souvenir. These publications list him as living in Indianapolis, and as does the 1903 Debris. Clearly, Purdue had lost track of their first graduate by this time. Harper was living in Durango, Colorado as early as 1887, where he was engaged in mining and hydraulic engineering. The second graduating class of Purdue University also consisted of one individual, a fellow by the name of John, what's the last name again? You pronounce it? Boer, thank you. Class of 1876. He's listed as an assayer and a rancher and hails from Durango. At least that is what some Purdue sources claim. Since Boer cannot be found in any 1880, 1890, or 1900 US census for Colorado, or found in any period Durango newspaper, it may be that someone at Purdue confused the two of them and never really got the record straight. Our 1876 graduate was a member of a brewing family here in Lafayette, and he later became the vice president of the company and possibly the president. I'm not quite sure on that. He's also credited with the first thesis written at Purdue University entitled Beer and Its Psychological Effects. And it's all handwritten, and I think it's like about 70 some pages, if I remember right. Not the most useful study for a career in ranching and mining, actually. He's buried in Springvale Cemetery in Lafayette. Interestingly, Jesse Harper Blair, who was in the fourth graduating class at Purdue, was Purdue's first librarian. He later moved to Indianapolis and to practice law. He actually moved to Colorado to practice law, moved back to Indianapolis, and he died in 1912, and he's buried in the Crown Hill Cemetery. Harper's inaugural appearance in the Durango, Colorado newspapers is in the late 1890s. In September, in a September 1900 article in the Durango Wage Earner, they note that Harper had been appointed to the post of superintendent of irrigation for Pueblo and the Acaria Indian reservations of New Mexico. It states that Mr. Harper is a thoroughly competent man, an expert in his profession. His appointment is a just tribute to the ability of which he has always been known. This is confirmed by a letter Harper sent to his old professor, Harvey Wiley, dated March 3rd, 1901, on Department of Interior letterhead, in which he discusses his appointment Department of Interior letterhead, in which he discusses his appointment in 1900. Clearly, he'd been in Durango a long enough time for the editor to know who he was and what his reputation was. Prior to working for the federal government, he had been elected to the post of La Plata County Surveyor in 1891, and was also for a time the city engineer. His reputation appears to be well deserved. In December 15th, 1903 issue of the Durango Democrat, it announced that he had been appointed to the Superintendent of Irrigation General by the United States Secretary of Interior. Harper's activity can be found in several Interior Department documents during the first decade of the 20th century. In the midst of his work, he did make one trip back to his alma mater. In March 6th, 1907, Harper toured Purdue University with Dean William F. Goss. He spent time with his old fraternity, Sigma Chi, and there was a banquet in his honor. The next day, the student newspaper, the Purdue Exponent, reported on his visit and gave his name as John D. Harper. It's not unusual for the Purdue exponent to get things wrong, but here you go. Harper's most notable engineering work was the Zuni Dam, now called the Black Rock Dam, an irrigation project that Harper supervised for several years. In the report of the Commissioner of Indian Affairs to the Secretary of Interior in 1908, he's highly praised for his efforts. The report was also his obituary. It reads as follows. The construction of the dam and the irrigation system was authorized by the department on July 22nd, 1903. The work was to be under the direction and supervision of John B. Harper, Superintendent of Irrigation. Mr. Harper discharged his duties with great energy and zeal and lived to see the dam completed, but died soon afterwards on March 25th, 1908. The employees who served under him have been granted permission to set into the rock work of the dam, a small marble slab with the inscription of Zuni Dam, John B. Harper, member, American Society of Civil Engineers, 1908. Tribute to his memory of this tribute to the memory of a very faithful and efficient field worker is regarded by the office as most appropriate. And as you can see, it's still there in the rock face of the dam. The World Almanac and Encyclopedia of 1906 confirms this to be John B. Harper of Purdue University. In it, he is listed as the earliest Purdue graduate still alive, and his address was Black Rock, New Mexico, the site of the Zuni Dam. For Native Americans in this region, the need for controlling limited water resources goes back for centuries. The annual precipitation of the area is less than 13 inches a year. In Indiana, the average is about 40 inches a year. Crops produced by Native Americans in the region were corn, beans, squash, chilies, cotton, and tobacco. Thus, controlling the water resources is extremely important. For the Zuni, irrigation canals, water reservoirs, and dams were nothing new. There are small-scale farming methods, some called waffle gardens, which should be obvious in these pictures, were well adapted to the local environment. Despite centuries of success on their part, this was a time when the dominant Euro-American culture insisted that Native peoples practice modern mechanized farming methods, which may or may not have been appropriate to every environment in the continental United States. This policy called for the breaking up of tribal lands by allotting parcels to individual families, and this opened up the land for non-tribal takeover and exploitation. In order to impose these modern Euro-American agricultural practices on local tribes and tribal groups, adequate water resources were needed. A proposal for water retention dam for the Zuni was documented as early as 1880, and the first attempt for building a dam in Black Rock occurred around 1898. Soon after this failure, a government agent called for a reservoir to be built. It was hoped that it would not only assist in the development of the area, but provide an infusion of cash into the local economy by hiring local workers. Harper arrived in Black Rock, New Mexico in 1902 under the orders of the Commissioner of Indian Affairs. The project was one of hundreds funded through the New Lands Reclamation Act of 1902 and called for irrigation, sale and development of arid lands in 16 Western states and territories. Harper and his survey team began the process of locating a suitable site for the dam. After a thorough survey of the site near Black Rock along the Zuni River, Harper discovered the surface basalt layer was only a cap over a number of highly erodible sand, gravel, and clay layers. The basalt was not a solid uniform layer at all, so water seepage was an immediate problem. Because of this less than ideal location, he considered a number of engineering designs and finally proposed the building of a hydraulic fill earth dam. This method involved the use of high pressure hoses to blast away the hillsides on either side of the river, and then using the debris as fill for the dam to prevent water seepage. Rock fill and a cutoff wall dug 40 feet down into the bedrock were added to the design. Kind of reminds you of the pyramids in Egypt, doesn't it? This photo is of the dam under construction. Shows a stepped structure made up of evenly cut stone blocks. At the time, it was the largest of this type of dam ever constructed. Harper employed Native Americans on his crew, not only Zuni, but also Hopi and Navajo tribal members. Whites and Hispanics were also employed. Although whites occupied the supervisory roles, some of the Native American laborers became shift bosses, teamsters, and equipment operators. The fact that he employed Native Americans at all and gave them positions of responsibility was, particularly as rock drill operators, as this picture shows, was unusual enough that it was noted in period publications. Harper was by no means perfect in his approach to Native Americans in his employ. The Zuni in particular needed time away from work to participate in ceremonial activity. Harper may not have been appreciative of this activity, but he and his Zuni employees came to an accommodation, and Harper built on-site housing for the workers so they did not have to travel very far for their religious activities. Harper's activities were not only confined to engineering. During the excavation, his workers uncovered fossil remains of several animals, and Harper had them preserved. The material consisted of a partial skeleton of a Columbian mammoth, a member of an extinct species of elephant in the Quaternary period in North America, remains of American beaver, fragments of extinct members of Equus camelotes and bison. The bison material is important that it's the only fossil evidence of bison in the Colorado Plateau in in northwestern New Mexico. The most important find was an extinct species of muskox that currently is known as Harlan's muskox. This muskox fossil is the only find of this species in the desert Southwest. The material was transferred to the Department of Interior, to the Smithsonian, and then to the Smithsonian Institution. And to this day, these fossils remain the only evidence of these species in that part of North America. Once completed, the dam was 420 feet long, 80 feet high, and complete with a 60-foot wall, 60-foot tall concrete gate structure. Unfortunately, the dam had significant negative impact on the Zuni. The government did little or no consulting with the tribe about the project from the start. The dam destroyed a sacred spring, and period reports mention sabotage, but including the removal of survey stakes. The dam itself was an engineering triumph, however. The site chosen, but the site again was chosen was a poor one. First, the Euro-American clear cutting of trees and overgrazing of sheep in the watershed caused significant erosion, and the lake behind the dam quickly silted up. Also, because of the unsuitable basalt layer, underlying sediments and other factors, the reservoir had significant maintenance problems that continue to this day. 3 times the dam has undergone significant redesign and rebuilding. And the dam has never at any time provided enough water that was envisioned by the government. Even Harper saw the silting would be an issue. The dam, however, changed traditional agricultural practices for the Zuni forever. Zuni have in recent past considered using the lake for recreational tourism, and as you can see, boating would probably not be a big thing. There used to be a campground along the bank, but again, when you don't have any water, nobody came. Specific to the engineering, Harper undoubtedly deserves praise. One inspector of the dam in 1909 stated, "In the course of engineering experience, we have never seen a finer or better built structure of its class. Harper is a man of his time," which is definitely true, "an agent of a belief system of unfettered progress and development, a system that believed that Native people had to change and accept the practices of the dominant culture, a system that believed that nature could be controlled. Today, this dam would never have been built. Numerous agencies would have been involved. Environmental and cultural impact studies would have been undertaken. Local population would have been consulted. Studies of the watershed degradation would have demonstrated its impracticability due to the silting. Studies of unstable soils and rock formations would have eliminated the site from consideration. The presence of a sacred spring to the local native culture would have caused at the best case scenario, the dam to be relocated. For the 4 years Harper spent completing the task cost him his health. At the end of the project, he traveled to Los Angeles, California to visit his cousin, and on March 24th, 1908, died what is described to be have been pneumonia and heart disease. In an article from March 29th, 1908, the Los Angeles Times, his colleagues, Chief Engineer W.H. Code of the Indian Service, and James D. Schuler, a consulting engineer for the service, praised his work both with the dam and with his treatment of Native Americans. Harper was a member of the American Society of Civil Engineers and was well respected within that organization. Prior to his time in government service, he was an engineer in 2 railroads, later served on the board of directors of the Durango Railway and Realty Company, which operated the streetcars for the town. He also worked in private practice in mining and hydraulic engineering in southwestern Colorado. He never married. John Bradford Harper is buried in the Durango Greenmount Cemetery. And after a century, the plaque that was put on the Zuni Dam in his honor is still in place. So that is the story of John Bradford Harper. Any questions? I guess I must have said it all.
I'd be interested if you know anything about when he was a student at Purdue. since there were so few students, what was the class structure? Were they in class together? Especially since they had such a
That's good.
university of students.
That's, I would assume that at least they wouldn't be specific, you know, like, since he was the only student of that class, it would be kind of crazy, but I don't know. But there is a slide here, way at the beginning, that tells you what his life was like as far as the courses he had to take his senior year. Astronomy, German, and you know why German? Because the engineering of the day, it was German. That's where all the really, that's what everybody modeled their programs after.
Well, chemistry was a big thing in Germany too, I think.
Yeah. Mhm, yep. And general quantitative analysis, and political economy, and moral philosophy. And I always get a kick when I was teaching at Purdue. I always got a kick out of showing this to current students about the costs. And tuition was free to in-state residents, which was very common for land grant colleges into the 60s. And you know, and then I think the biggest expense must have been board for $3.50 a week. And we can't forget washing. But yeah, you know, like in those first years, when they didn't, you know, they had all of these courses, but they didn't necessarily have the faculty to teach those courses. So I think there was a little ad-libbing going on to some degree, I would suspect. But those early annual catalogs and so on like that are available on the Purdue website, on the Purdue Archives website. Really fun to read. Sorry.
No, it's his mentor, Harper Wiley, did all kinds of things with the students, extracurricular. He organized sports, he organized camping trips, he organized the militia.
Right.
Made his own uniform, even though he was himself only a private in the Civil War. He wore a general's uniform and would hike the students around.
And steal chickens.
Yeah, and they ended up rescuing him one time. We almost drowned in the Wabash. Yeah. But the bond between Harper and Wiley was much stronger because when Wiley was in Indianapolis, he was working 3 jobs. He contracted erysipelas, which is a very severe skin disease, to the point where he was going to have the leg removed. He stayed at the Harper's house during that entire recovery period, which went on for about 6 months. And so was very close to the Harper family. So when he decided to go, he got the offer to go to Purdue University. He did recover from erysipelas. The doctor came in and said, "I'm going to have to take your leg." And he said, "Please let me die intact." But he did recover. So when he got the offer to go to Purdue, it was all natural for Harper to actually follow him up here with that, because of the closeness between their 2 families.
Yep.
Family.
But in those early days of military science, they talk about when Wiley would take the student military science students on a hike. The local farmers would hide their chickens because they would more than once they had chicken for supper, you know, in their camp.
Yeah, I think I read in Wiley's book that he woke up one morning and there was a rooster on his pillow.
That's right. That's right.
And he was also not well liked by some of the other adults in the Purdue community because of his bicycling.
Well, can you imagine wearing knickers.
Yeah,
And being on top of that, I think, one of the faculty had referred to him as a monkey,
yeah.
and how could that be representing the professorship? So,
Yeah.
in fact, I think the comments you made there about John Purdue making that comment, I think was directed to Harvard.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was one of those bikes that had, or bicycles that had one of those huge front wheels and little tiny back wheels. I know there's a name for
Well, his particular brand was called Hovde.
Yeah.
Because he had the huge wheel and then he had the small one behind there.
Yeah.
You have to have two of the students help hoist him up on top. And he-
them. Didn't they try to steal it or something at one point? There's several stories about that bicycle. And apparently there are stories that the archives had it for a while and then it disappeared, but I have no idea. Nobody can, there's no evidence that that actually occurred.
So David, on that picture that you were showing of the dam when it was being built, the blocks referred to as looks like pyramids. And there was that gap. I'm assuming that's where the water was flowing while
Yeah.
there was no water there.
Exactly.
So like, let's build a dam, what?
Well, yeah, rain follows the plow, all you have to do is say, we're here, start
Yeah.
raining, that was literally a belief system.
Wow.
That, there's, but yeah, he dug a lot of irrigation canals and a variety of other things that probably, didn't work any better than the dam did. But I remember when I first started working on this project way back in in the early days when I was in the archives, I actually talked to the engineer who was basically responsible for the dam and other things, and he was actually a Zuni tribal member and a graduate from Purdue, and he had no idea that Harper was a Purdue grad as well, and he thought that was really cool. But that one photo, that satellite photo of the dam really gives you an idea of what they're having to deal with right here. This is basically mud. There's a little bit of water right here. That's just dry land.
And where's the dam?
It's this area right in here, I think. Yeah, this area here. This must have been a good year because I think there's actually water there. But you can see it's just brown. There's a little green right there. But it's what was up, and he basically, he said that there had been a campground built and swimming pool and other things like that, and nobody ever used it. So I'm sure it's been torn out by now. But and again, these three photos here my son took, and then this thing here is that right there. And there's, I don't, other than these little puddles here, there's no water.
How close is that to Mesa Verde? It's in that.
That's a good question. I can't answer that.
Mesa Verde is up in the Four Corners area.
Yeah,
No, it's near Durango,
yeah,
I think.
yeah. I don't.
Look at it.
So. Any other questions?
Back on your one of your first slides, that early picture of campus, does anybody know the names of those buildings?
Oh, I think there's one or two of us here that can give you that information. We'll do the 1877 building.
Or the one before, maybe there's
Oh,
a
that-
slide, this
Yep,
one here.
yeah. Well, this building here originally was intended to house faculty. And when they finally decided that, that women could be, students, this became Ladies' Hall. And
So it was a dormitory.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of interesting stories about that building and events associated with it, including one student who was a chemistry major deciding to see if he could blow up a fountain. Yeah, and then this, let's see, and this is the men's dormitory here, which also comes with all kinds of stories. And it was torn down in what, 1960, I think, or was it later?
Yeah, I can't
But it later became like faculty offices. And this is the military hall and gymnasium.
You had another picture of.
Right, yeah, and this has all kinds of really interesting stories attached to it. This is. This, look. Okay, that's the gas house.
That's the powerhouse.
That, you know, where the gas was pumped to all the different buildings. Is that the barn? Or is, no, that's the outhouse.
Cause that's on North Campus.
Yeah, that's the that, you know, toilet and shower house, if I remember right. And this is the chemistry building. Yeah, right. All the different smokestacks coming out the top of it.
A point of reference, is that State Street?
Yep.
Going through the.
Yeah. And here's the original smoking fence. Which also has a very interesting story behind it. But yeah, so
So that chemistry building and the big dormitory would be close to University, where now would be University Hall or Stone Hall?
this is near the math,
Okay.
yeah. Is this being near the math building?
Sciences.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, of course, give you a better sense of, let's see. Let's see that.
Isn't that right next to the University, the University Hall?
I'm not sure why, but it's not moving.
That's on the ball.
Yeah.
And the armory back there, you know, was later moved.
Yep.
Over to where the current armory is now.
But they, yeah, this is where University Hall. Can't seem to. Okay.
Yeah, it's State, but it's State.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think you're right, John. I think they had started
Yeah.
University Hall.
But in 76.
There it is right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they started University Hall and then they stopped it and moved it. And then started again. But it was completed in 1877.
John, is Ladies Hall really where full banquets is now?
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, it's closer to the corner.
Remember that thing. If this measure, University Street had to buy one, strip of land back. They were at great cost.
And there are some photographs of the interior of all these buildings. In the Purdue archives, and many of them you can see online. If you dig through their history of campus photographs and et cetera, there's several different files. But yeah, and this held the campus bell. And like to announce when classes were due, it kind of. Sometimes the guy forgot to ring it. There's stories about students tipping it upside down and pouring water in it and during the winter, so it would freeze solid, so they couldn't use it.
Bill booked them in the morning.
Yep.
Called the chapel.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty much ready to get their
Mhm.
time. In fact, John McCutcheon talks about how he had nightmares about the bell in his life, throughout his life, that just kind of persisted with him, something that stuck.
And it got stolen at least once, right? Yeah, so.
Is the bell still in existence?
I don't think so.
The original bell, that building burned.
Yeah,
The original bell was damaged in the fire.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
And it's only company, but they replaced it. And that replacement bell, they built a building for it. That thing, and it's not a Victory bell. They run it through.
Yep, yep.
Need Victories. That's where it is. The bell, that's the second bell. That's
Yeah.
Where did you find the commencement program?
In the Purdue archives.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the letter that he sent to Wiley is also in the collection. But yeah, it's studying some of the early graduates of Purdue University and what they ended up doing and so on like that. It's really, really kind of fun.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much, David.
Yep.
Thank you.